Hey, welcome to the Good Friday Instagram Live. And I don't even know if people are going to show up today. It's Good Friday. The stock markets are closed. But what makes this day, of course, it's almost like every day is not quite a day off because we have all of this anxiety happening. But it is Good Friday, and the stock markets are closed. The last time the stock market was closed seems like an eternity ago. I think it was February 13th or February 16th. It was President's Day. The markets were closed. That feels like a century ago. Like I can't even tell now. It's almost like we shouldn't even number the date by 2020. This is year one of AC after coronavirus, because I feel like human history has BC before coronavirus and AC after coronavirus, because this is the first time in human history that the entire world, everybody in the world, all 7 billion people are motivated towards solving one giant crisis. And so again, if that doesn't qualify for like the breaking point where everything before was BC and everything after is AC, I don't know. So we're like almost in month number 1 of AC or month number 2 of AC, and this is year 0. I don't know. Did they start with year 0 or did they start with year 1? I don't even know. Was there a 0 AD or did it go from -1 BC to 1 BC to 1 AD? Was there an actual 0 AD? I don't know. So a couple people are joining, and and again, for people, just entering, there's no stock market open today. This is Good Friday. This is kind of like, oddly, I think it's like the first holiday of the coronavirus era. And again, it seems like an eternity ago that we were taking a day off from school or a day off from the stock market or a day off from work because of President's Day. And once again, I'll say, it does feel like, because this is such an important historical time, like I think it's worth taking a step back and forget about all the things we're all worried about. So we're worried about what's the government going to do? How long is this going to last? Am I going to lose money? Am I going to go broke? Am I going to lose my job? Am I going to get sick? Is so-and-so going to die? We're worried about all of these things. But just take a step back just for a second and appreciate just a little bit that, hey, Brandon, how's it going? I saw you were speaking at some online conference. That's a good way to go. Online conferences are gonna be the rage. I wonder if for speaking agencies, if the speaker's fee is the same for online conferences. But it sort of feels like, again, this is the most important time in human history ever. Like, despite everything we're now anxious about, worried about, scared about, one thing to always note is it's gonna change the rest of your life. This is the first time in history that the entire species, all around the globe, is united towards achieving one goal. Now, it seems like we're not united. There's still partisanship. There's still people fighting. There's this, that. But we're all dealing with the same. We're all dealing with the effects of the coronavirus, not only on health and the health system, but also on the economy and the collateral damage that the economy is having on families and lives and everybody. And it's so the whole world's united in this. We're living in this historic time. And again, I wonder if just the calendar should even be redefined to BC before coronavirus, which maybe is 2019 before, and AC after coronavirus, which starts with 2020. Because it certainly is the most momentous thing that's ever happened in my life. And I was at the World Trade Center on 9/11. I lived just 2 or 3 blocks away. I lived on Wall Street during the financial crisis, the Great Recession in 2008, 2009. I lived right across the street from the New York Stock Exchange. And now here I'm living in the city with, sadly, the most deaths and cases of any city in the world. And on the one hand, I'm sick of it, living in ground zero on every major crisis. But on the other hand, this is so much more bigger than every other world crisis I've ever seen in my lifetime. You could argue this is a worse crisis than many, worldwide, than many wars. And again, everybody's united towards trying to solve it one way or the other. And I think the key to success now, and it'll be the same as the key to success later, is what is your ability to deal with uncertainty in a time like this. So we can be very scared, and we can be constantly trying to figure out what's certain. Like, when will we reopen? What stock should we buy? What's going to happen next? What's the death rate in Italy? What's happening in Germany? What's happening? How many hospitalizations in New York City? And you see this on Twitter all day long. Everyone's arguing on Twitter. Nobody on Twitter is making policy. Like, you're just arguing with spectators, basically, on Twitter. It's just spectators arguing with spectators. It's pointless. So on the one hand, it's good in the sense that you're a lot of people on Twitter, for me, have been sources of data and news and interpretation more than the newspapers. Don't forget, the newspapers' agenda is to sell more newspapers. That's the entire, every article should be headlined, buy more newspapers, here's why, because we're about to scare you. And then the whole article is about something that scares you, and that's every single article in the news. So they have an agenda with every article. More deaths than ever. 20 million people unemployed. More deaths, more cases happening in China. So yeah, there was 39 more cases in China the other day, but it was all from people traveling into China. The article forgot to mention that. So again, the newspapers, I have not looked at, other than the headlines, just to see how ridiculous they are, I have not looked at a single newspaper during this entire period. But there are some Twitter accounts that I follow to get good, accurate interpretations of the news, and then I go straight to the source. So I go straight to the data, or I talk to the doctors, or I talk to the researchers who are putting together all these different models, or I talk to the people in government who are trying to figure out when to open up. So, and I think the latest on opening up, I think next Wednesday, Trump said he might release some information about how the economy is going to open up. Perhaps, I think what's going to happen is maybe the federal government will say no more social distancing guidelines, no more economic guidelines, but he'll leave it up to the states. So state by state, they can decide whether to reopen. And again, 32 states have less than 85 deaths. I think something like a dozen states have less than 25 deaths. So that represents 200 million people, and they're all locked down, and there's no reason for it. Now, New York City and New Jersey together account for much more than 50% of all the deaths in the United States. So right now, maybe these two areas should have an economic slowdown. Not a lockdown, but a slowdown. Because at this point, we do have to start thinking about taking very seriously the collateral damage. I'm not talking about the stock market. I'm not talking about getting your bosses paid and keeping companies in business. I'm talking about, here's an example. In Indiana, they have the number 211 is kind of like a mental health hotline. And normally they get about 1,000 calls a day. Right now, they're getting 25,000 calls a day on Indiana's mental health hotline. And it's for everything ranging from child abuse, domestic violence, suicide ideation. This is a sad time, of course, because of coronavirus and the deaths that are occurring. And it looks like the deaths are going to be in the U.S. are similar to flu season, which is kind of a sin to say. You're not allowed to compare coronavirus to the flu, but if the number of deaths turn out to be the same as the number of flu, that's horrible, that's sad, but the flu is a comparison point. But you have to ask, how many people, when we're trying to make policy, when we're trying to make decisions, you can't just look at one thing. Like, no businessman ever makes a decision just looking at number of sales. You look at, how much profit did we make on each product? What was the demographics of the customers? Which advertising medium was the best advertiser for us? So even a government, or especially a government, has to make a decision on multiple factors. How many deaths are there going to be? In this situation, how many deaths are going to happen because we're no longer treating people at the moment who have heart conditions or stroke conditions or cancer. Like people who get regular updates on cancer, they're not getting their tests done. A lot of those are considered elective. So somebody might get past the tipping point where they could treat their cancer because the cancer wards are empty because they're waiting for coronavirus patients. So again, not going to go too much into coronavirus data today. I think there's a little bit of data fatigue, and we all sort of know what's happening. And, on the economy, I do think the government is going to release the lockdown, and it's going to be state by state, maybe. And then by the end of the month, we'll see more of a complete unlockdown. So I'm going to start answering some questions. Let's see. Jay just sent me the file. Someone asked a really great question. I love this question. Should I feel guilty taking money from the government? And the reason that's a great question is because look at 2008, 2009. A lot of people were very angry at the government bailout because who did the government bailout benefit the most? It benefited the banks and the insurance companies. The banks and the insurance companies got literally $1 trillion from the federal government. And so people were saying, this is horrible, don't do it. But individuals right now should not feel guilty at all from taking money from the government. The government told you to stay home. So what are you supposed to do? Take every dollar you can from the government. Like the people who are trying to shame others into saying, this is not a welfare system, this is not communism, don't take money from the government. That's just stupid. The government itself made a stupid decision by doing this extreme economic shutdown that probably didn't move the needle at all on coronavirus. And of course you shouldn't feel guilty about taking money from the government. They owe you right now. So am I still thinking about moving on from New York City? Well, I'm not going to move anytime soon, but I am. I'll give you a story. I'll tell you a story. In 1999, I was looking at buying an apartment. I had just sold, in 1998, I had sold a company. I hadn't yet lost all the money I had made from this company, so I was flushed with cash. I did everything right. In 1999, near the top, I sold all my stock. I was cashed out, and I decided to buy an apartment. And so I was walking around with a real estate agent, and she showed me this beautiful apartment in Tribeca right next to the World Trade Center. And I said to her, this is in 1999, I said to her, Nancy, what if a plane hits the World Trade Center and the value of all this real estate goes down? Like for whatever reason, I was more focused on that. I'm just being honest. And I wasn't being prophetic or anything because in 1992 or 1993, there was a bomb in the World Trade Center. It was a reasonable worry. What if terrorists attacked the World Trade Center? So I asked Nancy, my real estate agent, this in 1999, right after she showed me an apartment right next to the World Trade Center. And she said, you can't live your life that way. So I bought the apartment, and of course, 2 years later, a plane hit the World Trade Center, and disaster everywhere, and blah blah blah. But sometimes you kind of have to live. You only have one life. You kind of have to live your life in such a way that not that you're going to be always in your comfort zone and always avoiding things you're afraid of, but if you think there's a reasonable chance something bad can happen and you don't want to be there when that bad thing happens, you should set up your life accordingly. Like I'm not going to be, I'm watching Breaking Bad right now. So, obviously in Breaking Bad, this high school teacher becomes a drug dealer, and it's probably not a good idea because there's a high chance something bad can happen. Yes, you can make some money, but there's a chance something bad can happen. Anytime you do something illegal, so you can make money, but something bad can happen. Or for somebody moving to New York City right now, just be aware, 3 global crises in a row, happened in New York City. So it's really not the best thing. Although New York City, I love so many aspects of New York City. I grew up around here my entire life. I've been here since 1994. I love New York, but I'm just getting sick of being at ground zero all the time. I kind of want a simpler life, particularly now that everything's going remote. And, remote working, remote learning, remote medicine, remote delivery. I could get a chef. I could get a world-famous chef to cook for me, and somebody will deliver the food to me while I'm watching a $200 million production on Netflix and sitting on my couch. I never have to move again once I find the right couch in the right city to sit on. So, but I don't know. I love New York City too, so we'll see what happens. What do I think will happen to the U.S. Postal Service? I do think that it's a shame that they are not using the Postal Service more during this shutdown. I think the U.S. Postal Service is going to go out of business. It's already bankrupt. It doesn't deliver packages as well as Federal Express or UPS. But I will say one thing. I will say one thing important about the post office. They should have used the post office for this stimulus package. Because here's what's happening. This is kind of a big ripoff. And I don't know whether to be upset about this or it's just something worth noting. Right now, the Federal Reserve, yesterday, they told the banks, the banks announced a couple days ago, we don't want to give these loans because we don't want to take any risks. And they were BSing because whatever. And they just wanted more money. And so the Federal Reserve said, don't worry, you don't have to take any risk. As soon as you give the loan, we'll buy the loan from you. So the bank's you're gonna go to the bank, you're gonna get your small business loan, and as mandated by the stimulus package, and then the bank's gonna turn around and instantly sell it to the Federal Reserve, but they're gonna take all their fees. So they're gonna take $20 billion worth of fees and take zero risk. Well, why do we even need the banks to do that? Why couldn't we have used the post office, given the post office half the fees, and that would have replaced the $10 billion in the stimulus package that are going to the post office? So, I don't know. It seems like we could have done something with the post office here. And just again, when in any other future crisis, studying this crisis is going to be a great lesson in decision making, in psychology, in leadership. One thing I'm expecting to see, and I'm already starting to see this, is that now that in many states and in many countries, like New York City, for instance, is past the peak. Cases have been stabilizing or even new hospitalizations have been going down. And Andrew Cuomo said today that thank God we did social distancing. But we don't know. We don't know what worked and what didn't because there's no we're using scientific data to test everything else like medicines and so on, but we're not using any real scientific data to understand what is the dynamic, like were more deaths caused and illnesses caused by the economic shutdown, the hospital shutdown, the coronavirus. We don't know how this virus really spreads. There's more evidence that social distancing is not the key. The key is just simply not being around someone for a long period of time that also has coronavirus. By the way, the phrases viral load and viral shedding, I am sick of hearing those phrases. I've never heard these phrases before in my life, and now suddenly everyone is familiar with the phrase viral load. It sounds pornographic, and yet that's, now it's a common phrase in our terminology. So, with my stimulus, here's a question. With my stimulus check, should I invest it or spend it? I love that question because there really should be a third part, which is should I save it? But Americans, and I get this because I have a hard time with this too. Americans don't like to save. We don't save money. The average American has $400 in cash. By the way, even when I've had a lot of money, I've had on average $400 in cash. So I go up and down in terms of whether I save or not. So, okay. But the question is, should you invest it or spend it? It doesn't matter. Don't be so eager to invest in stocks. Look at 9/11, okay? 9/11, the week after, the stock market crashed, and then it bounced back for 3 months, but then it crashed again, and it didn't really bottom until March of 2002. Same thing with the financial crisis. It crashed, then it bounced back, then it didn't fully crash to the lowest lows until March of 2009. So just because we're coming out of this now, don't be so, yes, buy safe stocks if you want. They're certainly going to be higher because of this stimulus. Like oil companies will be higher. Any online, most tech companies are going to be higher very quickly. A lot of companies relating to municipal bonds are going to be higher. So there's plenty of bonds there that are trading, or stocks that are trading way down. So you could buy stocks. There's lots of opportunities, but you don't have to be so eager. You're not going to make a huge amount of money with that. You don't want to take so much risk in a very risky period. But now is a great time to invest in yourself with like online courses, or maybe trying to start your own business, or maybe, I don't know, just many more ways to invest in yourself that are going to be successful than invest in stocks. Like, let's say you took an online course on photography for $2,000. And then 3 months later, you got your first gig. Oh, you're going to photograph your friend's wedding for $2,000. You just made 100% on your investment. That's very difficult to do in the stock market. But the more you invest in yourself, the more money you're going to make. The most money I've ever made is when I invested in myself rather than investing in a stock. I've never created wealth investing in a stock. So, thoughts on networking. This is such a great question. So right now, I'll tell you what I'm doing about networking, because now is like a great time to network. Keeping hydrated. First off, we don't know. We're all home from our jobs. Some of us are remote working. Many people, 20 million, 30 million people, have either been laid off or furloughed, which is sad. But do you really want to go back to a corporate cubicle job? I don't know if you do or not. Like, some people like it because it feels safe, but look how safe it was. So Nassim Taleb, he has a great quote, is that the 3 most addictive things in life are heroin, carbs, and a stable paycheck. And look what happened to the stable paycheck. Everyone thought they had their stable paycheck, but boom, this virus happened. Oh, everyone got laid off. No severance. I know so many places where the employees got laid off, 0 severance. There's one company, Envision Health or Envision Medical. They just informed all of the doctors that their pay is going to be cut by 1/3. They're not going to get their bonus checks, so that's 1/3 of their paychecks. How can you do that to the doctors working there? And again, the whole thing about the economy is that the economy and healthcare are not separate. The economy pays for healthcare, it pays for the doctors, but still, nothing in a corporate job is stable or safe. And you can make much more money investing in yourself and figuring out ways for you to make money. But also a job, I sort of feel like a job is this human domestication program. Like, you get a job, and the first thing that happens is you're not told like, oh, jump in right away and help us build this rocket ship or this drug or this amazing solution. The first day at work, you're basically given a big handbook and a lecture. This is how you should dress at work. This is the words you're allowed to say. This is how you talk to the opposite sex. Oh, and here's your cubicle that only goes up to here, and it's 6 feet by 6 feet. You know, even in jail, a prison cell is 8 by 8, and at work, a cubicle is 6 by 6. In jail, you have a toilet in your cell. In work, you have to share a toilet with 200 other people on your floor and your boss. Nobody likes to go to the bathroom next to their boss. That's an awful, nightmarish experience. How are you going to then look at spreadsheets together or ask for a promotion after he just heard you doing all of that at work? So I don't like being corralled into these domestication programs that are called jobs. And by the way, if you create value for the company, you don't get any of that value for yourself. Like, before you get any value, for like every dollar of value you create in a job, first the shareholders get value, then the CEO gets value, then the COO gets value, and all the way down the line, everyone else gets paid until you get probably 1 penny of every dollar of value you create. But when you work for yourself, you get $1 of every dollar you create. So there's so many more it might not be as stable, and there are some years I make no money, and some years I make a lot of money. So it's a little bit more volatile, but you do make more money when you learn how to work for yourself. Not at first. It took me many years. Like, I'll tell you, when I was an entrepreneur for the first time, I was working at HBO, and on the side, I started making websites for other entertainment companies. So I'd work all day at HBO, And then I would run downtown and I'd work at my own company all night. And I did that for 18 months before I quit my full-time job. I was so scared to take risk that I worked both things. Even though I was making so much more money by working for myself on the side, I was making about $42,000 a year at HBO, but I was making that per website that I was doing at my company on the side, and I built up to about 20 or 30 employees. We even built into a big space, but I still kept my full-time job in a cubicle. My title was junior assistant programmer or something like that. And finally, though, after 18 months, I quit my job. It was a whole story, but I quit my job and went full-time to my own company, and it was worth it until I went completely broke. And so someone was asking about networking. So I started off by saying it's important to network now because that's how you create opportunities. That's how you create ways to make money that will, believe me, the more you network now, the more money you will make later. Every time you do any sort of networking, that plants the seeds that could grow into money later. And so I was talking to Jordan Harbinger yesterday on my podcast, and he started talking to me about a course he gives called the 6-Minute Networking Course. And he gave me a really good idea, which is every day at a certain time, and he said for him it was 10 a.m. on the West Coast, which would be 1 p.m. on the East Coast. So every day at 1 p.m., send a text, scroll down your texts, and see who you haven't responded to or who you haven't texted in a while, and send them a text. Don't ask for anything in the text. Just maybe mention, congratulate them on some achievement, or mention that you noticed one thing they're working on that you thought that was very interesting, or mention some news that you thought would be interesting to them, or share something that you think would be interesting to them. Don't ask for anything. Don't say, hey, can you please hire me for this? Or can you please meet me for coffee or anything like that? Just give. Send 4 texts a day to somebody you haven't texted in a while. And if you do that on every weekday, by the end of the year, for comparing yourself to someone who's not doing this, you've just sent 1,000 extra texts to people who you want to network with. So for instance, let's say someone was on my podcast, like let's say Ray Dyer, let's say Mark Cuban was on my podcast, and I wanted to continue networking with him, but I don't really have anything to say. I might send him a text, hey Mark, great job on how you kept on paying all the employees who work for the Dallas Mavericks. Good job. So I didn't ask for anything, but what happens is that I'm the one person maybe who texted him that, and it stays high in his mind, so that the next time he's thinking of, going on a podcast, he reaches out to me. You never know what could be the result, or he mentions me to somebody else who then comes on my podcast or buys my book or wants to engage with me in some other way. Who knows? So 4 texts a day, and why text and not email? Email, the open rate for emails is about 7%. The open rate for texts, phone texts, SMS messages is about 90%. So this is an awesome networking technique that if you just do that, then again, within a year, you'll have texted and networked with 1,000 more people than everybody else, than all your competition. And that's a great thing. And again, you never know if one of these 1,000 people mentions you to someone else who then hires you for something, or then buys a company you start, or wants you as a speaker or a consultant or whatever. You just don't know the results of this networking. Networking doesn't have to have a goal. So that's technique number 1, 4 texts a day. Ideally to people you haven't texted with in a while. So scroll all the way down your text messages and send a text. Then, great idea, look at your calendar for the past year and look at everybody you spent time with. And then ask yourself, did I feel good about myself after spending time with this person? Did I enjoy it? And that gives you a good hint about the people you could eliminate. Life is, as we see, life is very short. You're not going to be able to spend time with all the people you think you need to spend time with. You're not going to be able to spend time with everybody. So you need to start limiting the people you spend time with. So look back. So this is Jordan Harbinger's suggestion. Look back over the past year and maybe see who you really liked and who you really enjoyed spending time with. That was in your calendar. and eliminate the ones you didn't want to, that you didn't have a fun time with, or you didn't get any benefit from. Not to be so, oh, I have to have benefit from everyone, but you should feel good about yourself. One time I had this boss, and he would always invite me to dinner. He was always very generous. He would invite me to dinner about once a week, once every 2 weeks. But when I would get home, I would think to myself, boy, I really did not feel good about myself. He was always slightly putting me down whenever we went out. And so finally, I left that job, and my life was so much better as a result. Not a huge amount better, but when you start eliminating the toxic people in your life, and they might be people, they're going to be people close to you, like a boss or like a family member, or even someone you've been friends with for a long time. You only have so much to spend in life on toxic people, and then you have to cut it out. So you can't spend the important moments of your life with people who are toxic. And this sounds almost kind of cliche, and yet we all do it. We all spend time, and we say, oh no, it's just a dinner, and so-and-so's my boss, I've got to do this. You don't have to do anything. You're free. You're a free person. And if you're not free now, when are you going to be free? When you're 80 years old? When you're 90? Like, you have to, we're moving into a world with no retirements. You're always going to be dealing with people in a work context, in a social context, and so on, and in a family context. Again, it's a cliche, but the family you're born with is not the same as the family you die with. So it's okay to eliminate family also if they're toxic to you. So networking, just these techniques, send 4 texts a day, boom, you've just sent 1,000 extra texts per year than everyone else. Go down your calendar, see who has been toxic in your life over the past year, eliminate them. Don't spend time over the next year with those same people. Another important thing, this is something that I do. I try to do it every day, and it's amazingly valuable. Your network, this is a very important thing to understand. Your network is not the list of people you spend time with. It's not like, oh, I spend time with Jill, Jack, John, Joe, Janice, Janet, and all the other people with a J name. It's not that list. Your network is all the people you spend time with and all the ways they connect with each other. That's exponentially higher than the list of people you just spend time with. That's just a list from 1 to 100. But imagine if you count all the connections between those 100 people, and the more those people connect with each other, the bigger and more valuable your network is. So what I always do every day is I try to introduce people to each other, and I call this permission networking. So, and this happened to me yesterday. A friend of mine who's very big in government wanted to go on some more podcasts, but he doesn't really know the podcast world. So he said, James, can you introduce me to some podcasts? And this guy, well-known guy in government, is running for a major office, very great guy. And so what I did was I ran a couple of podcast ideas by him. I wanted to get his permission that he would go on certain podcasts. And then I called up each one of those podcasters and I said, here's this guy. He's well known. Here's his name. Here's what he's done. And I got their permission to say, oh yeah, send them our way. We'll put him on the podcast. And then I made the introduction, permission networking. Now, I don't benefit at all from this. My friend will go on this person's podcast and boom, they meet. But I benefit because all of these people, if I do permission networking every single day, all of these people know that A, I'm respectful of their time, B, I'm thinking of them, and I'm thinking of how to provide value for them by doing introductions, and 3, I'm the source to find interesting opportunities. Oh, you want to find a podcast to go on? Oh, you want to find interesting people? Oh, you want to find a way to get investors, or you want to find a way to publish your book, or you want to find a way to meet so-and-so for your party? Boom, I become the source. So permission networking is a very valuable technique. And if you think, well, shouldn't I let's say I introduce 2 people and they start a business together and they make $1 billion, shouldn't I charge a fee? No, absolutely not. I mean, unless that's your business. But if 2 people get together, they start and you introduce them and they make $1 billion, you're going to benefit. Trust me, you're going to benefit at some point. You don't have to have your hand out. It's going to work out for you if you consistently do things like that. And I use as an example, think of a company that has $1 trillion of value and their entire business model is to send people away from them as quickly as possible. Well, that company's called Google. So Google's worth $1.5 trillion, and their entire business is, if you go to Google and say, hey, can you tell me how to cure herpes? Google will say, we don't know anything about herpes, but here are the top 10 websites you could go to that could maybe help you. See you later. And Google actually measures their success by how fast people go away from their site. So if you can measure your success by how fast, if someone comes to you for help and you could think of people that could help them, the fastest you can get permission on both sides and connect them up, and now they're off to the races, the more valuable your network is and the more valuable you become. So I call that permission networking, but in a broader way, it's called the Google technique, and it's extremely valuable. It has created an enormous amount of money and opportunities and even just fun for me. So will people start working at co-working spaces again? That's another question that someone asked. Good question. And the answer is no. WeWork was already going out of business before this virus happened, right? And so now SoftBank just cut off WeWork's money. They just said, we're not giving you any more money. WeWork is suing SoftBank, but WeWork was always a company that was on welfare. They depended on the kindness of others to exist. That business model going away. And why is it going away? Because we can work at home now. I could co-work with you on Zoom or Skype or on Instagram or whatever. So co-working spaces are going away. Now, there's a ripple effect. WeWork is also the biggest renter of commercial real estate in New York City. So, and probably in in all the cities in the United States. So what's going to happen to commercial real estate when WeWork goes out of business? I think there's a problem. I would not be investing in commercial real estate anytime soon. Do you think we are entering a depression? So this is a question. Do you think we are entering a depression, like the Great Depression, based on the trillions of dollars in corporate bailouts? Very interesting question, because a Great Depression will not happen during a bailout. In the Great Depression in 1929, I explained this yesterday, but the Great Depression in 1929 happened because we did the reverse of a bailout. We raised interest rates. We clamped down on the economy because the president at that time, Herbert Hoover, and his Treasury Secretary, Andrew Mellon, said we don't want people speculating like they did in the Roaring '20s. They thought that is what caused the stock market crash. And instead, they actually, because of those policies, they created the Great Depression that lasted for 11 years. So in a bailout, so much money is going to be hitting the economy that the danger is we're going to have the reverse. Now, we're going to have numbers this month that look like depression. Ignore those numbers. Depression is really a long, extended, severe downturn in the economy. That's not going to happen. The danger is the reverse. We're going to have trillions of dollars entering the economy, and the danger is hyperinflation. So hyperinflation doesn't happen overnight. So it'll happen maybe if it happens at all, which it didn't happen in 2009 or 2010. But if it happens at all, it'll happen in 2022, 2023. There's a way to fight it. We don't know if it's going to happen or not. I don't think it will happen. Yesterday I explained why, and that video is up on YouTube now. But I don't think a depression is going to happen because, well, I explained that yesterday. But the way to fight hyperinflation is own things. Don't keep all cash. And this is for me to remember. I like to keep cash. I don't like to be low in cash just because I almost have PTSD over the 8 other times I've gone broke where I was low in cash. So I like to keep as much cash as possible. But the key to avoid hyperinflation is not to have cash. So own some stocks, because if you own, let's say you own stocks that are like an oil company, well, oil is going to go up because oil is priced in dollars. So if there's hyperinflation, instead of oil being $30 a barrel, oil might be $1,000 a barrel. But if you own oil stocks, those stocks are going to go straight up. So a way to hedge against inflation, if you're worried about it, is to own stocks. Actually, it's to own real estate, or it's to own hard assets, gold, Bitcoin, whatever you can own outside of cash is a way to hedge against inflation. But I'm not so worried about it tomorrow. Tomorrow, in the next few months, the next year, there's going to be a surge in the stock market. There's going to be a surge in the economy. It's in the ideal time to do a startup. Look at the startups that happened during the last... We're on Instagram right now. Instagram started during the Great Recession of 2009. started in 2009. Slack started in 2009. All of these great, Dropbox started in 2009. All these great companies started during the last recession. So now is a good time to be thinking about startups. Let's see, thoughts on Yelp business strategies pre and post COVID. Yelp is, of course, that's a really interesting question, because I do think restaurants are going to be going out of business, and what's going to happen to Yelp, which survives on reviews of restaurants? Well, this is a great question, and it's really interesting, because if you go on Google Maps, I don't know if you've seen on Google Maps, almost every location you can write a review for. So let's say you were planning, there was one time I was planning on taking a trip to Auschwitz, to Poland, and I looked it up on Google Maps where it was, and I saw there was 18,000 reviews on Google Maps of Auschwitz. Who reviews Auschwitz? What does a 5-star review for Auschwitz mean? Or what does a 1-star review for Auschwitz mean? It sounds almost grotesque. Thank God they didn't have Yelp or Google Maps reviews in 1944. What would have been the reviews have been? So, and then, you look at, I was thinking of Mount Rushmore, and the Google reviews were insane. It was somebody gave a 1-star review to Mount Rushmore, which is this huge, American sculptural wonder. And some guy who gave it 1 star, he said, "This is such a shame. I drove 2,000 miles to see this once beautiful mountain now badly disfigured. 1 star." No, he said badly defaced. 1 star. And I'm thinking to myself when I'm reading this 1-star review, didn't you know what Mount Rushmore was? And by the way, they didn't deface the mountain, they faced the mountain. That was the entire idea of Mount Rushmore. But people like leaving reviews, even if it's stupid reviews. They think their opinion is important. They go to Mount Rushmore and they say, oh my gosh, the other 7 billion people on the planet really need to know what I think about Mount Rushmore. They really want to know this. So here's a 1-star review. So deface this mountain. And so so to answer the question though, Yelp should expand beyond restaurants. Yelp should now start expanding to every location. And maybe, you know what? Maybe Yelp should start expanding to professors or bosses or jobs or corporations. So right now there are different sites that call it rateyourprofessor.com or rate your boss or whatever. Yelp should start doing all of these things. Reviews of people, reviews of every location, not just restaurants. So I think Yelp needs to reviews of products, and then links to shop for those products, and Yelp can get affiliate fees on anyone who clicks on those links. So Yelp can expand their business in many ways that will actually benefit, be important during, the new normal. But if you're just focused on restaurants as your business model, you might have a hard time. Government jobs are safe right now because government has just increased their power incredibly. When you have $6 trillion in stimulus, you have to have the jobs in the government to hand out that money. So government jobs aren't going anywhere. For better or for worse, by the way. Bigger government means less private sector. But when you're thinking about, well, how do we cure coronavirus? The government's not coming up with a cure. It's private businesses are coming up with the cure. So the more you increase government, the less money goes into the private sector, so the less money goes into healthcare, the less money goes into drug research, the less money goes into AI research, and so on. So yes, government jobs are fine, but I don't know if that's a good thing. Can you make money on the upcoming collapse of the commercial real estate market? Yes, you can. So, but I don't know if anybody's done this yet. So my assumption is the smart hedge fund managers out there have already done this, but call up your broker and see if you could buy what's called credit default swaps on big, large commercial real estate firms. So credit default swaps are like insurance on whether or not a company is going to go out of business, and it goes up if the company goes out of business. So I don't know, try to find some combination of those, but also make sure they haven't already run up too much. But that's a complicated way to make money on the collapse of the commercial real estate market. Another way you can do it, but I don't recommend this, is to short commercial real estate stocks. But do not do that because they're going to shoot up and you can go bankrupt that way. Any thoughts on the future of healthcare? Yeah, of course, telemedicine and teletherapy are going to be huge. Also, very important, right now, there's no AI in healthcare. Like right now, if I go to work, if I go to the doctor and I have certain symptoms, the doctor, he or she should be able to put my symptoms in and then compare it with all the other symptoms happening to people around the country and see what diagnoses have been happening around the country. Maybe we would have found, now there's a lot of evidence that coronavirus was in the United States in January or maybe even December. So if doctors had some centralized system, or even decentralized, but some AI system that was analyzing all the different symptoms that were happening in doctors' offices around the country, the AI might have noticed that there was a new virus hitting the country 3 months before it was officially announced coronavirus is in the US. So I do think AI and healthcare are going to start to merge more and more. Also, robotics and healthcare are going to merge because doctors now do not want to touch. Look, 15% of the hospitalizations in New York City, I think, are healthcare workers. Because the more you touch someone with a contagious virus, the more likely you are to get the virus. So robots are key in the future of healthcare to help doctors deal with very contagious patients. So start thinking, all of these things that were going to happen anyway, put the word accelerated on it, and that's what's going to happen. So AI and healthcare, that would have happened maybe in 10 years, but now it's going to be a business model today. Robots and healthcare, that maybe would have happened in 10 years, but now it's a business model today. Automation, self-driving cars, that's going to happen much faster. Anything with automation and AI is going to happen faster. So ironically, Andrew Yang was talking about the problems of automation and its effect on jobs. I agree with Andrew Yang on UBI. I think that's a good way to buffer as people go reinvent themselves and go from career to career. But I don't think we're doing a slowdown on automation. We're going to do a speed up on automation. Automation is going to change everything. Look at Amazon stores have no employees in them. So we're moving towards an employee-less society where everybody's going to, either employees are going to be limited or you're going to have to invest in skills. Skills and ideas are going to be the currency of the next century. Not degrees, not, I went to Harvard and then I worked at Goldman Sachs and now that means I'm qualified for your job. No, what's going to make you qualify for a job is the way you've invested in yourself. Did you build up skills? Did you build up your idea muscle by writing 10 ideas a day? This is going to be the currency of the next century. This is how people are going to get work, they're going to get jobs, they're going to build careers, which is worth actually exploring. What's the difference between having a passion and having a purpose? So having a passion, people always say, I get these letters all the time. Oh, I'm 18 years old, I'm 25 years old, I'm 47 years old, and I don't know what my passion is. Is it too late for me? No, of course not. I've been passionate about so many things in my life. I even change my passions now. I'm over 50 years old. I change my passions now. It's never too late to start from the bottom and rise quickly to the top. But passions aren't necessarily so great. It doesn't like some people have a passion to have an impact or a passion to be famous. You need a lot of self-awareness to have a very reasonable passion. And most passions, the outcome of most passions are not what you think. Like, think of who was the president of the United States right before Abraham Lincoln. So Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States, arguably one of the most important presidents or the most important president in U.S. history. Who was the 15th president? I asked this question, hardly anyone knows the answer. The answer is James Buchanan. He was president for one term, also arguably one of the most important presidents in U.S. history because he was probably in the top 5 for worst presidents in U.S. history. I mean, the Civil War happened essentially the day he left office, so he did a horrible job of uniting the country. James Buchanan, his passion, his entire life was to be president of the United States of America. He was the most powerful man in the world. And yet now, only 150 years later, nobody remembers who this guy was. James Buchanan, one of the most important people in U.S. history, nobody remembers who he is. So having a passion does not grant you immortality, and even achieving the greatest success in the world, being the president, does not achieve you any lasting immortality in history. And in fact, Buchanan was a horrible president and is worthless, and nobody remembers his name. But so much different is having a purpose. Like maybe your purpose is, hey, I know a lot about yoga, so I'm gonna teach classes and then write a book. Or I know a lot about this period in history and I have a different type of interpretation on it. So people need to know about this because it affects how they do current decision making now. So I'm going to write about it. That's a purpose. Or let's say you love TV and you have an idea for a great TV show. That might be your purpose, to have a better TV show than the average BS that's on TV, the average dumb reality show or the average dumb sitcom or whatever. Maybe you have a great idea for a TV show. So that's your purpose. So again, it's always good to have some purpose, something that excites us about getting up in the morning, something that we want to work on. It doesn't mean we're happier doing our purpose. Having a purpose could be really hard, because the only way you can succeed if everybody's competing for the same goal, the only way you can succeed is through struggle, because nobody wants to struggle. So the person who goes through struggle in the smartest way, doesn't mean don't go through struggle in a dumb way. Try to figure out shortcuts through the struggles, and that's where you can really come up with innovation. But having a purpose and then achieving success in it is not pleasant. Somebody who wants to be a great professional baseball player, or a professional tennis player, they're gonna lose many games. They're probably gonna lose more games than they win. And every game you lose or every match you lose is painful. And it's a struggle, and you have nightmares that night. When I used to play tournament chess when I was a kid, I literally would have nightmares all night if I lost even a single game in a tournament. Or I would skip school the next day. I was so depressed. So having a purpose is not pleasant, and it's filled with struggle. But if you get on the other side of that struggle, if you get on the other side of everyone who says you can't do this, you're going to find success. Elon Musk is an interesting example. He wanted to build a rocket ship that could go to space. And everyone told him, you can't do this. You don't have a PhD. Or what do you think you are, the government? What do you think you are, NASA? And so he didn't know anything about physics. He wasn't the government. And yet he went through the struggle, and he found the right people to work with, and he found the right things to study. He skipped the line on building a rocket ship and beat out the US government on building new rocket ships that could go to space. And now he has SpaceX, a multi-billion-dollar company. So having a purpose and then getting through struggle in a smart way helps you get on the other side and achieve success. By the way, a lot of people will not go through the struggle. Everybody wants to be comfortable, and I don't blame them. The comfort zone is a valuable zone to stay in. I like to stay most of the time in my comfort zone. Right here is my comfort zone. I like to stay here. But when you want to achieve something, when you want to achieve a purpose that you think is meaningful, you're going to have to get out of your comfort zone, and that's where nobody else is, and that's where you get noticed, and that's where you achieve success. Let's say you're a writer, and I'm going to write a book about a little kid who suffers from some child abuse, who finds out secretly he's the world's greatest magician. What a great book idea. Guess what? Harry Potter has already been written. So you have to find a way to change that a little bit so that you're the only one doing something. You're not in the comfort zone. I don't like, and I always say this, and I've said this before on these IG Lives, I do not like to hit publish on an article or a post or a book. I don't like to hit publish unless I'm really scared about what people will think of me. So for instance, a few weeks ago, I wrote that I have a physical addiction to a medication I took in 2010 or 2009, over 10 years ago. I started taking this medication for anti-anxiety called Klonopin. At the time, I was going broke. Everything was going wrong with me. I was losing a home. I was going broke. I was getting a divorce. I started taking this anti-anxiety medication called Klonopin, and then when I didn't need it anymore, I tried getting off of it, but you can't get off of it. Like if you Google addiction to Klonopin, there's horror stories. You could have epileptic seizures, you could have strokes, you could have all these problems. So for 10 years, I've been slow. It doesn't even do anything for me anymore because of the addiction, but I've been slowly getting off it. I've gone from 4 milligrams to like a half a milligram a day now. Hopefully I'll be off of it within the next 6 months after 10 years of trying. But when I first wrote about this, I was really scared. What will people think of me? But it got a huge response, the article. You should only write something if you're scared of what people are going to think. You should only invent something if you're scared of what's going to happen. Because otherwise you're in your comfort zone. If you write something where you're not scared, it's just like, oh, I'm going to write the Joe Biden is great, or I'm going to write Trump is the worst president, or Trump is the best president. Well, everyone else is already writing those articles, so you have nothing new to say, and it's not interesting. You'll get a little bit of clapping because everyone will be like, oh yeah, he agrees with us, but you're still not saying anything interesting. You might get a lot of engagement because everyone's clapping like, yay, he agrees, he thinks the same way we all do, he's on the team, and it'll feel good, but you're not saying anything interesting. You're not going to succeed as a writer. I remember just a few months ago, I wrote an article about the things that I liked about Andrew Yang, and I liked the UBI. And there was this flood on Twitter, this flood of Yang Gang that just loved me, and I was so happy. But then I wrote another article, but here's the problems, here's the questions I have, not the problems, but here are the questions, hard, difficult questions I have for Andrew Yang that I'm confused about, that he hasn't answered. And suddenly, that same group hated me. And I said, I'm allowed to ask questions. You don't have to tell me I deserve to die in a ditch and then burn to death or whatever. Just because I'm asking hard questions doesn't mean you should hate me. It means I'm trying to engage in conversation. That's what freedom of speech is. That's what democracy is. But again, I knew that would happen, and I was afraid of what would happen. But you're not saying anything interesting in an article or a speech unless you're saying things that you're afraid of what people will think of, because nobody else is saying those things. So, very important. Here's a great question. And Jay, keep these questions on this page. Don't erase them because I didn't answer all of them. How do you monetize ideas? That is such a great question. I mean, over the past 25 years, I've made money only off of my ideas. I haven't had a job since 1997, and I've only made money from my ideas, 100%. And so, not tomorrow, but Monday, I'm going to talk about how do you monetize ideas and all the different ways you can monetize ideas. This is a great question. It's really important. In this new world that we're going into, ideas and skills are the only currency. Degrees, where you worked before, your credit score, all of that is bullshit. Ideas are the currency of the 21st century, and it's really important that you also learn what does it mean? It's one thing to be good at having ideas, but then how to monetize, how ideas turn into currency. I will talk about that on Monday. I look forward to it. I'll also summarize any new data that happens on the weekend or any new economic news we hear. I'll answer the rest of these questions and more questions on Monday. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know on Twitter or on Instagram if you enjoyed. I'm also, later today or tomorrow, I'm going to do another quarantine book giveaway. The second monthly quarantine book giveaway. Here's the books I'm going to give away. All of Nassim Taleb's books, Fooled by Randomness, The Black Swan, Anti-Fragile, and Skin in the Game. These are all great books. Even just for the titles alone, these are great books. But I haven't set it up on my Instagram yet. I'll set it up later today or tomorrow morning. But I'm going to give away these books to 5 or 6 people, and you'll see the instructions, no strings attached, but you have to follow me so I can DM you. But check out my Instagram later or tomorrow, and I will be back on Monday answering questions on coronavirus, the economy, how to monetize ideas, and so on. I hope you in 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I hope you enjoyed this, and have a good weekend and have a good Easter Sunday. I also wanted to talk about Easter Sunday a little bit, but I'll talk about that on Monday. There's an interesting relationship between The Last Supper and Andy Warhol, Salvador Dali, and Leonardo da Vinci, and I want to explore it, and Battlestar Galactica, and I want to explore it a little bit because it's a real good demonstration of idea sex and idea addition. So I'll see you on Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Check out my quarantine book giveaway when I release it, and I hope you enjoyed This session, we covered networking, we covered Yelp's business strategies, we covered hyperinflation and what to do, we covered the future of healthcare, we covered real estate, New York City, and so on, and many other things. Have a good weekend and a happy Easter Sunday. Thanks.